Hello guys, this is Jonathan Steadman, and today I want to talk to you guys about why I like to use Linux. At the moment I am using Windows 10 because I finished with doing some gaming, but yeah, so now I'm going to do this recording this video now. I just wanted to talk about why I like to use Linux on my older PC, which is the Optiplex 380. It is a very old PC. I did not upgrade it, I just left it as it was. It came with Windows 7 or something like that. But I install Linux Mint and it runs perfectly. It runs like a new computer, like it just came out. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like Linux, but I will talk more about that soon. Okay, so the first reason why I like to use Linux is that because the terminal is awesome. And that is true. If you're like a real nerd and likes to use like MS-DOS or just want to get stuff done quicker, then the terminal is great. Basically, a terminal is a program which allows you to do text-based instructions, such as if you want to install something, then you can go and open up the terminal and type down sudo apt update into the terminal, and that will check if there's any updates available, and then we can do sudo apt get updates. No, it'll be sudo apt get upgrades, and then we'll be able to update with system. It's not sudo apt get update, it's sudo apt get upgrade. I need to remember that. I always get confused by them. But yeah, so this is why the terminal is great, because it allows it to get things done a lot more quicker, and it's like really good for nerds who likes to use MS-DOS or something like that. So the second reason why I like to use Linux is because Linux, it can run pretty well on very old computers, and we can actually run it on Commodore 64 if I wanted to have that. It probably will be able to run on Commodore 64 but yeah, we might find it hard to install it onto Commodore 64, but I bet that there's like one distro in this entire world that will be able to run on it. So this is how great Linux is. We don't actually need to install like a graph user interface, so you can just leave it as text based, but a graph user interface allows you to play games and stuff like that, so we do need a graph user interface. But if you want to run a server, then text-based OS is fine, and Linux is actually quite popular than you think. So yeah, that's why, because it can run on very old computers. We don't even need to have a graph user interface. It can even run on Commodore 64 because of just look how many low resources it uses. It's very low. It's lower from Windows, to be quite honest. Okay, for other reason why people want to use Linux is because it's open source. That means that the source code is available for anyone to view, edit, and make their own version of it. And Linux is a bit different from FreeBSD, because FreeBSD, I think it's FreeBSD, but this is what the PlayStation uses, is FreeBSD. And yeah, FreeBSD allows you to use their services, and FreeBSD is completely open source, but once we modified it and did all the stuff with it, we can make it closed source. But with Linux, it has to be open source. We cannot make it closed source, it has to be open source, but FreeBSD is basically the opposite of that. So yeah, open source is basically that the code is available for anyone to view. So yeah, if you wanted to know what open source was. And then also privacy respecting. That means that, well, some distros would spy on you, or they would collect some data from you, but it's nothing as high as Windows. They will maybe only collect data about our hardware and stuff like that, so that way they can improve that on their distros to make their operating system as available and runs perfectly on most computers. But one disadvantage of Linux is that if you've got a Windows 10 PC and you install like Linux distribution on there, it won't run 100% as you want it to, because obviously the computer was made for Windows 10. But we will find a Linux distro that will work perfectly for PC. Okay, so the other reason is that it's free on cost. So Linux is completely free, and yeah, we can download it if we wanted to for free. So that means you don't have to pay a license, and so that way when you're building your own like your own PC, then it should be all fine, because you can just install Linux onto it. But the disadvantage of Linux, which I'll talk more about in the next episode, is that for software compatibility issue, we might not be able to run softwares in games that we want to run, such as MSXS or something like that. MSXS is basically a Microsoft database creation tool. So it allows you to create databases for businesses. But yeah, one of the most advantage of Linux is that most distributions are free in cost. They may ask you to pay, but these other basically like Soaring OS has like the advanced version of it, which allows you to do more customizations. But I don't really see a point of getting the paid version unless you want to support the team. So yeah. So and the other massive advantage of Linux is that it's much more customizable than when Windows. There are many different types of Linux desktop environments, such as GNOME, KDE, LXQE or something like that. There's Mate, there's Cinnamon, and so on and so on and so on. And there's thousands of Linux desktop environments, and I'll show an example of one. Okay, so I like to use Linux Mint, which uses for Cinnamon desktop environment, so we can download on their website. They are recreating their website, so it might look different like tomorrow or something like that. So soon it will look completely different, but it looks a little bit outdated, but they're improving on their website at the moment. So this is what I use, this is Cinnamon edition, and yeah, I use this on my other machine, on my Dell Optiplex 380, and this is one of the examples of the desktop environments with these icons and which icons you can click on. And there's also GNOME as well, which is a little bit more modern, but does not run as fast because it uses up a little bit more resources. But if we search up GNOME desktop environment, then we will find out that so this is another example of GNOME. This is an older version of it. I think this is like 3.38 version, or it could be older, but I'm going to try look there. This is the latest version, GNOME 40. So yeah, this is basically what GNOME is with these icons and stuff like that. Yeah, this is Ubuntu desktop environment, which is based on, which is GNOME basically, but they did like a massive customization of it. So that's why not always up to date with the GNOME updates, especially when there's like a new big release for GNOME. It's not always going to be up to date because they customize their own one, and it may take a while for it to update. A few releases of Ubuntu it might take, because I think they're still on the GNOME, the older version of GNOME, and they're still working on getting GNOME 40 to work correctly with Ubuntu. But you guys can manually install it, but I don't really recommend that because it could break your system. But you know, well, it won't break your system, but people don't really recommend you to install GNOME 40 on Ubuntu for some reason. But yeah, we can basically run whatever desktop environment you want. It could be Cinnamon, it could be Mate. We will have the freedom to do whatever we want with the customizations, and we will still get all these security updates. We will still be able to get these upgrades. But yeah, we can upgrade to Linux distribution at any time, even by customizations that we do with it. So we talked about customizations, and Linux is everywhere and popular, but not popular on desktop. So I'm saying here is that Linux is everywhere. Linux is in your car when you want to turn on the radio or something like that. It's in your toaster if it connects to the internet. Linux is on your smartphone if you use Android. Linux is on web servers. Linux is basically everywhere. It's on the servers who use Linux at the moment because I'm accessing the internet, and the internet uses Linux. So yeah, Linux is popular. It's just not popular on the desktop side because more people want to use Windows, is because more software is available there. Okay, so there's lots of Linux distributions to choose from. We talked about this a little bit, but there's Linux Mint you can install, which comes with Cinnamon, but we can always install GNOME or something like that. For Linux Mint, for Ubuntu, we can also install that, which I showed with the desktop environment. This is another Linux distribution that we can install, which uses the GNOME, but customized version of GNOME. There's always Soaring OS as well, which you could also install, and there's Elementary OS. Elementary OS is more of a Mac sort of user, so if you are like running an older version of of Mac OS and it's no longer supportive, then we can always install Elementary OS. I used to have this on my computer once, but I just didn't like it anymore because they're very slow with the upgrades. But it's very good if you want to have a stable software, if you want to use a stable operating system. But for softwares on the App Store, it's not up to date, so they have some issues there. And I think that some people had issues with Elementary OS 6 for some reason, but these are what people had. But Elementary OS 6 is new anyway. I think it came out in August, so I wouldn't worry about that. I will just wait for a few more days to install it. But I recommend people to install Linux Mint now. Linux Mint runs perfectly on Dell Optiplex 380. Yeah. Okay, the other thing is that it's stable and easy to use. And that is true, it is stable and it's easy to use. You can get one that looks exactly like Windows 7. We can even customize it to look a little bit more like Windows 7. But as you can see from this, it looks a little bit like Windowsy. This with this taskbar here, and this icon here, and this icon here. But we don't have this search bar, thank God. And we also don't have Cortana, yay! But we still have a task viewer in there, I do believe. We'll also have these icons here, and we'll have a time and notifications and stuff like that. So yeah, thank God we don't have Cortana in Linux. That would be a nightmare. Cortana is a useless thing. It's like bloatware. Okay, so we talked about it being stable and easy to navigate about. Install is easier than Windows 10, and I do agree with that. Like, whenever I would install Windows 10, it's very difficult for me, but every time when I install Linux, it's pretty easy. So yeah, we can install Linux like straight away without having any issues at all. And install for Linux is a lot more modern than Windows 10. For Windows 10, installer looks terrible, but that's just Windows. Okay, so the next thing about Linux is that for less hardware resources is being used. Sorry, my spelling is not good. So meaning it's faster. So that means it uses up less of the RAM, it uses up less of the CPU, and it uses up less of the resources, such as disk resources and stuff like that. And this is a good thing, because it will make a computer run a lot more faster if less hardware resources is being used, and will expand its lifetime. But we're still going to get bad sectors and stuff like that, so do not expect it to be 100% perfect. So yeah, this is basically uses up less resources. The extra thing I would want to say, this is going to be my last point, is that there's less bloatware. So that means we don't have Cortana, we don't have these Xbox things, we do not have these useless tools such as this. We don't have these. There's just advertisements, which is bloatware. I didn't even install this game. I didn't even install any of these stuff, and they're still here. Why are they here? I don't understand. I didn't even install this game, and it's still here. I didn't even install Photoshop, and it's here. I didn't even install Messenger. Jesus Christ. But yeah, as you guys can see, this is all bloatware, as I was complaining that I didn't install any of these. So yeah, what I mean by bloatware. But Linux has no bloatware at all, unless if you're running a very silly operating system. But yeah, most Linux distros doesn't have any bloatware at all. They might have one or two softwares that we don't use, but they're useful for other people, such as a firewall. Some people want firewalls. So yeah guys, I might end this video there. So this is like 11 reasons why I would install Linux, and why you guys could install Linux on an older PC or even on a gaming PC. Linux has great support for gaming. We can download any game I want for Linux. We can use Proton, we can use Wine. We can basically run Windows applications with Linux as long as it's working good with Wine. But it's not always gonna work. Sometimes you might encounter some errors, like you can't run MS Access through Wine because of software compatibility, and also because it doesn't run the best in the Wine. But they're improving it and improving it all the time. There's always updates coming to Wine. But like in 10 more years time, you probably will be able to run MS Access if I believe in them. But yeah, it will. Wine is getting better and better every day, and it's getting better support for games. It does not have as much games as Windows 10 at the moment still, but it is improving, and you can play Stardew Valley, we can play Counter-Strike, we can play Team Fortress Classic, Team Fortress 2, and etc. on Linux, and we can even play Minecraft on Linux. So yeah, Linux is getting a lot more popular, meaning more games is getting popular there, but it's only getting popular, well, only a tiny bit. Very slowly. Linux is getting more popular. I don't think it will ever beat Windows, but I think that Linux has a great future though, even though I don't believe it'll beat Windows. But yeah guys, this is my opinion about Linux and why I think that Linux is great. Yeah, well, I appreciate it if you guys like this video and maybe subscribe or put a thumbs down if I hated this video. But I want you guys to put a like, please. And yeah, we can always subscribe so that way we can watch my other videos that I will make. And yeah, on my next video I might talk about why people hate Linux. And yeah, this is what I will do tomorrow actually, talk about why people will not use Linux. And there's so many disadvantages as well as advantages. Yeah. The other thing I want to mention though is that before I leave, is that Linux has a try it mode. So that means you can just put in a USB stick with a Linux installed, and then you can just try out for distro without installing it. So that means you can keep your current operating system installed. So that way we can play around with it. If it's not with taste, such as that we do not like the desktop environment or find it too confusing or something like that, then that's fine. Just log out and you still have your current operating system. But if we really like it a lot, then we can install it if we wanted to. So yeah, I like the try it mode. It's pretty useful for new beginners who wants to try out Linux and see if it's their taste with their desktop environment and their distro. Anyway guys, I'm going to end the video there. Thanks guys so much for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.